what happens with the postmodernists is they say, oh, there's an infinite number of interpretations. And then the human part of them goes, okay, well, what am I supposed to do next then? Since there's an infinite number of choices. And the postmodernist says, well, my theory can't account for that. And then they say, well, back to Marxism. And so that's why I think there's this unholy alliance between the postmodernists and the neo-Marxists. It's because postmodernism is a dead end from the perspective of applicable wisdom. It leaves you bereft and nihilistic. And that's not good, because people can't exist without a purpose. And so they sneak the Marxism through the back door and jump into this power landscape for the reasons that we discussed earlier. So,
you really think that it's because of an infinite number of possibilities interpreting things? Because I've always felt that it was really just a response to capitalism. They feel that capitalism is a very negative aspect of our culture and society, and that there's got to be some sort of an alternative. Marxism is a clearly defined alternative that other people have subscribed to in the past. You could point to it. It's a structure that's already set up, and it's romanticized. And I think they adopted for that reason, because it has the socialist aspects attached to it, and they looked at socialism as some sort of a thing that it regards equality, and it's some sort of an egalitarian approach.
Well, okay, so we'd have to take two things apart. We'd have to take Marxism / Marxism and postmodernism apart. So we could do that historically. And I would say that although there is a reason for postmodernism, which is the reason we just discussed, that the landscape, the infinite landscape of interpretation problem, it's a real problem. If you look at it historically, postmodernism actually grew out of Marxism. And so what happened is that the Marxists laid out their theory about the human social environment being composed of a power struggle between the privileged and the underprivileged, right? The rich and the poor in its initial phases. And that's a story that's partially true, and it's got a lot of motive power. Like, the motive power is the romantic motive power that you just described. I get to be on the side of the oppressed. I get to be a warrior for what's right. There's the resentment element, which is, that son of a bitch has more than me, so let's cut him off at the knees, which manifested itself brutally in the Soviet Union. And then there's the ideological totality issue, which gives people a sense of security. That took a vicious hit by the late 1960s, because the murderousness of Marxism had been clearly laid out as a doctrine. And that opened the door to this move by mostly French intellectuals to develop the postmodern philosophy, which has these advantages which we described, but also to use that as a screening tactic for allowing Marxism to transform into identity politics. And so it's hard to disentangle all the motivations that are going on in there, but there's something about it that's truly intellectually pathological, because you don't get to be a postmodernist and a Marxist. You actually technically cannot be both of those things at the same time. And the fact that most people are both of those things at the same time raises the specter of just exactly what their motivation is. And then I would say it's this resentment-driven anti-capitalism. There's reasons to criticize capitalism, obviously, but it's this underground resentment-driven anti-capitalism that I think is one of the fundamental motivators.